So, Bob, as usual, we have a lot of really great questions from the patrons for us to answer. What do you say, Bob?
Let's answer these questions.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk. I'm a therapist, a professor, and a question answerer. Who are you, Bob?
I'm your every now and every fortnight question answer therapist in practice here in Seattle and your old friend from grad school.
Upper tier patron Joyce from Los Angeles says, Dear Kirk and Bob, last year I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Therapy has been a sobering and humbling experience. As I researched the traits of borderline in relationships, romantic or platonic, articles online seem to lend themselves more towards people affected by a borderline parent, friend, or partner. The conversations between you two offer a nuanced and compassionate understanding of the diagnosis from multiple perspectives. I cannot express how invaluable your conversations have been. The podcast has become a safe emotional presence in my life that allows me to continue the work to look inward and do right by those I love. Changing the subject, all mental health professionals I've seen have been white, and I find it to be a challenge when speaking of intergenerational trauma in immigrant families or anything related to racism. I appreciate your perspective as an Asian American and really wish that the mental health profession were more diverse. Why do you think this happens? What more can be done? Bob, what do you think as a white person?
The question is, why is it mostly white people that that do this kind of work?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's, well, okay, psychotherapy has its roots in the medical community in Europe. So that's white people, white men. It comes into the U.S. in the 10s, 20s, 30s. White guys, doctors, I think mostly. I don't know when we started having psychology degrees. In the 40s and 50s, CBT comes online. That's medical doctors trying to help soldiers with what has become known as PTSD. So a lot of the earlier writers are medical doctors. So I'm thinking that it has its roots in the patriarchy.
Right.
White patriarchy.
Yeah. And European. So
European, right.
When we look to Asia, to Japan, China, Korea, Vietnam, they don't have as robust of a tradition, or really anywhere outside of Central Europe, going back to the 1800s with Freud and others, of talk therapy. Talk therapy was, and still is to a lot of communities around the world, a very novel idea, a very strange idea. So the fact that it's dominated by white people is because it emerged out of the white world. And we might think, well, it's 140 years since Freud started off it. It's like, well, it takes centuries, apparently, for things to change. And so it's a big problem. It's not in our field now. It's not just white people. It's white middle class women, and that's good because a lot of women can feel safe in our field in a world when they don't necessarily feel safe all the time. But on the other hand, men don't necessarily feel safe, because there aren't enough men therapists out there. There are a lot in our community, but in other communities, maybe not so much. In my early career, I remember I would get a lot of males, teenagers and adults coming to me. They're like, oh, thank God you're a man. I just want to talk to a male therapist. Have you ever had that before, Bob?
No.
Oh, well, I have. Maybe it was mainly among teenagers because they thought that these young men needed role models of some sort. But anyway.
I do remember being in a DBT skills class at the University of Washington in the research study. And all the research subjects were women. And what they'd say to me is, well, you're 3/4 girl, so we're glad to have you.
Yeah. So now why does this happen? In addition to what Bob is saying, there's just racism. We live in a racist society, and thus any institution within a racist society will also be racist, both as individuals and as a system, as an institution.
I like that sentence.
Yeah.
Any institution in a racist society will also be racist.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and my professor in my doctorate, one of my best sort of mentors, Phil Cushman, he said that. And when he told that to me, and I was just like, oh my God, yeah. Like that, it had the same similar effect it had on you. It's just like, oh yeah, of course, because we tend to think of like, well, we have a racist society. Yeah, we all know that. But then we think, well, this institution, it's not racist, but you're just like, well, of course it's racist because it's not like the society lives under the umbrella of psychotherapy culture. Psychotherapy culture exists within a racist society and a heterosexist society and an ableist society and, all the isms society. Anyway, so there is racism among not only therapists, but also among admissions workers at universities. This is probably more of a problem for Black people, but any non-white person is going to be, at least through implicit bias. There's also a lack of role models. I mean, Bob, can you think of, just regarding Asian therapists, can you think of any famous, of course we can think of a lot of white famous therapists, but can you think of any famous Asian therapists?
One.
Which, who?
What's his name? I never met him. He's in the EFT community. He practices in China and Canada.
So famous that you can't remember his name.
I know. I'm sorry. Mavis Tsai. Mavis Tsai? T-S-I-A-I. I'm saying Tsai. Mavis Tsai. Okay. She's at the UW. She is married to Bob Kohlenberg. Do you know who he is?
No.
The functional analytic psychotherapy.
Would she be famous if she weren't married to him?
I don't know. I think they write together, so I don't know if she writes solo.
Yeah.
And I don't think she's that famous, like she's not going to be on Oprah, like that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. But, among therapists. But you and I could rattle off literally like 100 white therapists that are famous. Freud,
mostly men.
Horney, just Jung, just the whole line there.
So, yeah.
As an Asian person myself, you would think I would pick up on this sort of thing. And I can only think of a few famous people. And the main one is Insoo Kim Berg, who arguably wouldn't be famous if she weren't married to DeShazer. But she's a fantastic therapist. It's in Sushin focused therapy. And then we have Sue and Sue, who write in our field as well. But obviously not household names. So there's a lack of role models, and when people see people like them doing things that they want to do, then they do it. Whereas if you as a young person don't see anyone like you doing what you want to do, then it's harder to feel like you're able to get into that field. And this is obvious in a lot of different venues. So we need to have more role models. We need to hold up diverse individuals and highlight their diversity, and maybe that will help to attract people that are like them into the field. It's also, as an Asian American, I can attest to this, that psychotherapy is not seen as a prestigious career. Asian Americans typically will be very oriented, on average, of course we're talking about millions of people, but on average are typically attracted to fairly prestigious types of jobs like medicine or dentistry or tech or law or something. Asian Americans, depending on the country you're from, there tends to be a high value on education and career and occupation and financial stability and pragmatism in career. And this translates into, and also Asian Americans, because of a lack of tradition of psychotherapy in their home countries, don't value that action, that service. On the opposite end of the spectrum, when I meet Jewish people or I have a Jewish client, they fit into therapy on average very easily. I'll have Jewish clients that'll show up and they just launch into, they know what therapy is. They take to it really well. They're very vulnerable. They like it, and they know what it is, and they're not sort of hung up on anything. And why is that? Well, it's because, psychotherapy emerged from Jews in Europe. So, and at the beginning, it was essentially just a Jewish Central Europe profession. And in the beginning, if you were a young Jewish person, because it was one of the few things that Jewish people were allowed to do, then you were attracted to that. Anyway, so it's just gonna take a long time for attitudes to change and stigma to be reduced. And so the other thing is a lack of outreach that universities and professional organizations can do. I know that they do a lot of outreach, especially these days, but maybe there's more they can do. Yeah. So what can be done? Well, Asian therapists need to speak up more and show their face more. Asians need to answer the call, and instead of doing what their mom wants them to do and become a physician, if they want to become a therapist, then answer the call. Also, we need to reduce stigma. We need more outreach, and we need to reduce institutional racism at universities, which is a lot more prevalent than people realize or want to admit.
I wanted to ask you about that. What was your experience in grad school? Most of our teachers were, I'd say, mostly almost like 95% white.
We had
people.
We had one black person.
One black person in the core faculty, or all faculty?
I only remember one black faculty member, and the rest were white.
Right.
Yeah.
So no Asian people.
Yeah.
And I don't recall any adjunct people they were all white. And I think mostly women.
Yeah, and it wasn't even talked about. I don't remember anyone even bringing it up. Today they'll bring it up. Today there's enough awareness that white professors are very quick to say that this is a problem. Now, at my university now, we have a lot more diverse faculty in my program, couple and family therapy. I think it's a majority non-white. We have a lot of people of color, and that's helping to create a more safe space, to be more attractive as role models to other people. But to answer your question, I was so used to Asian racism by the time I was 25 and entered graduate school that I don't think I noticed it. And it's complicated, of course, and I don't remember anything overt happening. There's a lot of microaggressions that probably happened, and it's also kind of a microaggression that it just wasn't even acknowledged, that my difference or the racism I experienced, it just wasn't, it's just not even brought up as a topic. It's just like a non-issue. And so maybe I could cite that as an experience, but I could also easily say that people were good about it and that they weren't jerk faces and they were open-minded. The other thing is I'm half Japanese and will often, quote unquote, pass as a white person. And so I'm guessing if I was full Asian, there would have been more of an issue. Also, I'm a man, so I benefit from, privilege there. And so maybe it offsets, greatly offsets any kind of racism I would experience as a half person.
I don't think I ever asked you about it.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever mentioned it. I think that's one of the microaggressions is we've been friends for 25 years and we've rarely talked about it and I've never asked you. And I don't know about my behavior. I think this stuff's like bad breath. Sometimes it's hard to smell your own. How are things between us? Like
you and
I
me?
Never asked you. Yeah.
You're a supreme racist, Bob. Just joking.
I know.
No. No, I've never had any displeasure or complaint. I, on one hand, have absolutely experienced problems, but on the other hand, it's pretty light, and I'm not going to say that this is everyone's experience in my category, but for me, I can honestly say when I study the racism that other groups experience and other people, even other Asians experience, the racism I've experienced personally has been pretty light. not that I haven't. I mean, I've literally been called a chink and a Chinaman and a gook, and people have picked fights with me because I'm not white, and I've had to, fight back, and I've been pigeonholed. Like one example that pops in my head is when I first started working in Antioch. And I don't know if this was a man thing or a young thing or an Asian thing, but everyone saw me as the tech guy, even though
Antioch?
Yeah. But this was at a time when everyone was a boomer. All the professors were like 99% were 60 to 75. And so computers were, these are people who are like 75 to 85. So back then, now you'd find a 60-year-old and they might be pretty good with computers, but 10, 20 years ago, no. So I was, and it often annoyed me that, because I really worked hard to be a good professor, and I thought I was a good professor, and I thought that my students really valued me as a hardworking professor. And yet, what was highlighted about me in the beginning was that I was good with computers. And that was my value on the team, And I remember thinking, like, one, I'm not that good with computers. Like, I'm just better than you. And two, like, I'm not here to be. I didn't take this job to help you with your fucking computers. I came here to teach because I'm a goddamn good teacher, and my students appreciate me as a teacher. And to be, so I didn't know if that was an Asian thing or a young thing or a man thing, but and of course, you can experience microaggressions as a man and as a young person, younger person. But anyway, now I will say that I'm getting real annoyed with TV and movies that don't have Asians in it. I recently rewatched The Descendants with George Clooney.
Oh, yeah.
And this happens on Hawaii. Yeah, I think on Kauai, I believe. Actually, I'm positive it's on Kauai. And the entire movie, the plot is that George Clooney is becoming the recipient of I don't know, generations of land ownership, and on a Pacific Islander person of color, shall we say, island, right? And in the end, he makes a good decision. But throughout the movie, there's no Hawaiians, there's no Asians. They're completely in the background. Every once in a while you'd see an extra that looked a little brown. The entire movie is just dominated by white people. When you go to Kauai, it is filled with brown people, and I think George Clooney is supposed to be partially a descendant from one of the Hawaiian kings. That's why he owns that land.
Him and his family. Yeah.
And he's white as white, and his entire family is white. Like Beau Bridges is his cousin.
Right.
And the first time I saw this 10 years ago or whenever it came out, I didn't really notice it, because it was just such a normal thing. But now I'm just getting really, another thing is watching Cobra Kai. Have you watched Cobra Kai?
I watched the first season.
Yeah. I think the first season is all you need to watch. The second season is pretty good. Third season, not so great. But they're doing a thing about karate, which is obviously Japanese. And they're in Los Angeles, which is, if there are places with Asians, it's there, And so I am getting tired of that. Now, is it ruining my life? No, but it's just another acknowledgement that, like, I'm ignored and I'm always considered a foreigner, and my people don't matter, and no one cares about our faces or our stories, or just no one cares. And my Asian ancestry in this country goes back 120 plus years, and many Asians do. There are Chinese families that go back farther than that. My family has been in this. My Japanese family has been in this country longer than most white people's ancestry goes back. I mean, there are plenty of white people. It's just like, oh yeah, my grandparents came from Germany or something. Yeah. and yet they are assumed to be American,
Right.
and I'm assumed, and anyone who looks like me is assumed to be like recently here. And that's the other thing, is like whenever they do manage to write us into a story, the parents were immigrants. Instead, like the one example that I have that I liked was this movie called Always Be My Maybe, which is a great Asian American movie with, what's her name? Ali Wu, and I can't remember the guy's name. But
I
anyway.
love that guy. He is so funny. But I haven't seen that film yet. But I know who you
Korean,
mean.
yeah, it's a great movie.
Yeah.
It's a great rom-com. And his dad is played by an Asian American guy who doesn't have an accent. So it's one of the few examples where you have an Asian American person, one, that doesn't have an accent, which is strange, and then two, the parent doesn't have an accent.
Yeah.
That's like completely unheard of.
Yeah.
And again, it's not like there aren't immigrants from China or from other Asian countries. Okay. But the thing I always say, and I'm probably going to repeat myself when I talk with this about Bob, with Umberto, is imagine it as a white person, Bob. Imagine yourself. Imagine like every TV show and every movie and every commercial, white people were either just not there, or they had an accent, or on the off chance that they didn't have an accent, that the parents had an accent. Just imagine, every TV show you watch, and you're just like, and you know, you're not hating it. You like the story, and it, you know, it's Asian Americans, it's Latino Americans, it's, you know, Muslim Americans, it's, you know, various different people. And there's not a single white person ever in any, not just in one show, but in all the shows. It would feel weird, right?
It would feel weird.
You'd be like, are we just going to ignore the fact that we exist? Do we not live here? Do you not know we've been here?
Yeah.
And we're not, and I'm not talking about like a small group of people from like Papua New Guinea who, there's probably a percentage of people from Papua New Guinea. We're literally talking about like 5 to 7% of the United States.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about millions and millions of people.
We are. Right.
And so the fact that we're just completely non-existent is, it hurts, you know, and it doesn't ruin my life, but my wife gets an earful whenever we watch a show like Cobra Kai, and I'm like, oh, Asian without accent, good, you know, like the one Asian. And the first 2 seasons in particular were bad. By season 3, they had a bad guy that was Asian, which was fine, but he didn't have an accent. It's like, I'll take it, you know what I mean? But anyway, and Cobra Kai is under fire because they don't have any Asian American writers. They don't have any Asian American people on the staff, and it's like, really? Anyway, having said all that, on the scale of racism worlds, mine is minor compared to others. And I know that, you know, it's okay to bring it up anyway, but I just want to say that, you know, if you're Black, if you're Native American, Indian, if you come from a certain background, if your accent is a certain way, if you look a certain way, you know, it's a constant battle that some people have to deal with that I just don't. So I want to acknowledge that, you know, that's my place. But anyway, how do we get here? So upper tier patron Joyce, yeah, I hear you and I'm with you, obviously. Anonymous patron from New York says, this is a question for Kirk and Bob. Can you provide advice to help manage a defectiveness schema? So Bob, you've talked about how you have a defectiveness schema, how you feel like there's something deeply wrong with you and that no one would really love you if they really knew you, you know, that kind of. I have recently become aware of how deeply my life is impacted by my defectiveness schema, my social anxiety, isolation, body shame, interpersonal issues, performance, work anxiety, all seem to be rooted in the schema that there is something inherently wrong or bad about me. I was wondering whether either of you have any suggestions to help manage this schema. Bob, what do you think?
Well, I'd like you to consider personal counseling if you're not already in it. And I'd like you to consider the possibility of establishing a safe relationship with the personal counselor so that you can talk about it and talk about your experience of however that manifests in your connection as it grows with that therapist. I don't know your situation, obviously, but I do like the idea of you pushing your limits. Not ignoring them, but pushing them a little bit. So like if you're not dating, date. Right? Get yourself out there. Give your brain a chance to at least see the defectiveness schema as it wants to manifest in, say, body shame or forgive me, I can't remember some of the other things that you said. So I like that idea.
I mean, how do you deal with it? Does it when it crops up? How do you deal with it? You know, how I deal with it now is really different from how I dealt with it 6 or 12 months ago. Like, it cropped up today because I had a tough interaction with the couple that I work with. With one of the members of the couple, I had a tough interaction last time I saw them. And I think before, the defectiveness schema would have been like, oh, mea culpa, nail me to a cross. Oh, I'm such a bad guy. I can't believe I did that, and grovel. At least if not out loud and overtly, then at least in my heart, to feel like a big, asshole. Excuse me for swearing. Now, today, the way I view it is, it scares me. I have not inklings, that's the wrong word. I have waves of that kind of fear that I'm some kind of bad actor. And I also can hold up the other end, which is basically a quote from Wayne's World, which is, Led Zeppelin didn't write songs that everybody else would like. They left that to the Bee Gees. And the truth is that I don't need to be liked. And as I was watching this tough interaction unfold and then watching the consequences of that in the session, I thought there might be lemonade in this lemon. Like this thing that I would have called bad or wrong 6 or 12 months ago. I'm like, I don't know if it's bad or wrong, but I am watching something unfold here between these two people that hasn't unfolded. And that maybe they say the oyster's answer to irritation is the pearl. The pearl is the oyster's answer to irritation. I saw this couple starting to make a really significant pearl, and I don't know that they wouldn't have made it if I didn't get into a thing with one of the members of it and push, and her letting me know she didn't like the way I pushed, and me acknowledging that and like, yeah, I get why you didn't like that. I don't think I like it either, and I'm not going to stay stuck here. We still have work to do. Seemed like a catalyst to me. So my point is the following. My defectiveness schema would want to scream at me that I'm a bad guy and I'd want to, roll away in shame, which is not good for them and not good for me either. And instead, it's more like the Led Zeppelin thing. And that's what you have repeatedly reassured yourself, that it's essentially okay and normal to be disapproved of sometimes, and that doesn't mean that there's something deeply wrong with you.
The disapproval may not have anything to do with me.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay. So it's making me reframe the way I understand other people's disapproval.
Right.
Like as their disapproval as opposed to my disapproval.
Right. Exactly.
Like if you disapprove of me, then I am indeed disapprovable. Whereas maybe you can disapprove of me and like, okay, well, I can live with that. And I can also see where that might not be my table.
Right. Yeah, I think that's good advice for all of us, honestly. For me as well. Just like, okay, you disapprove of me, but that doesn't mean that I am disapprovable.
Yeah.
And it's normal to be disapproved. Your behavior is disapproved of sometimes, either through misinterpretation or accurate interpretation.
Yeah, right.
And that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means that someone didn't like what you did, you know.
We know that for a fact.
Upper tier patron KG from Canada says, I appreciate your so much. I'm a master's counseling student in Vancouver, and I wanted to bring up a class dynamic that's been troubling me. Before each class, we have a check-in where we all tell everyone how we are doing. The professors do not discern whether it's optional or not. I've had to repair broken boundaries from living with a borderline personality disorder mom. I was in a high control group as well, so it's uncomfortable to not be asked for my consent. But the social norm in the class pressures me into the check-in experience. Plus, I'm unclear on whether this is counted as participation marks. How do I speak up about this? Lots of people are bonding through oversharing, and the instructors let the leaky boundaries and rescuing continue. Can you speak to these counseling dynamics, counseling class dynamics? Bob, what do you think?
Well, leaky boundaries is an opinion, not a fact. So oversharing is an opinion, not a fact. Your opinion makes sense, but I'd like to be clear that it is an opinion, not a fact. You sent this question to me last night, and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, yeah, this person's angry, understandably so, doesn't like what's happening, doesn't know the rules. Like, is it optional? That's an important question. If I choose not to participate, what's the consequence? That's an important question too. There might be a social consequence if you decide not to, but you're wondering, is there actually an academic consequence? To me, this is a question to take to your professor outside of class. I wouldn't do it in class because it's too fraught, right? There's too much pressure. There's too much, so I would take it up with the teacher or teachers outside of class and ask these questions. And to the best of your ability, make sure you're asking what you want to know, but ask in a matter-of-fact way. If you go in there with 6 guns blazing, you're probably not going to get the result that you want.
Yeah. And acknowledging that you have traumas about people oversharing and invading you and forcing you to share, and that it's valid to feel uncomfortable about that. And a good psychology professor will hear that and accommodate for you for sure. But yeah, I agree. It is an opinion that it's oversharing and invasive, because it's a very common process, and I've never known a student not to enjoy this. In fact, for a long time, I didn't do check-ins because I'm pretty introverted as a student, and so I never really liked the check-ins personally. And for years I taught my case consultation class, and I didn't have check-ins. I would give these forms out for people to fill out, and then they could sort of use that as a introverted way of communicating with me anyway. And then I would ask them on the form, do you want me to bring this up? And so they could communicate with me on the form, and then they would optionally opt in to bring stuff up in class. And over time, and it worked pretty well, but the con was that it just didn't give a chance for everyone to check in on how they're doing, what their mood is, and what's on their mind, and for other people to hear it and to bond around it. And a few years ago, I think a student actually said, can we do check-ins? And I was like, oh, okay. And I just never stopped it, and I got rid of the form. And it's a great way for students to relax, to get into the mood of the class, to bond, to get support from each other, to normalize the struggles. And it's a very, very useful thing. Now, upper tier patron KG from Canada, if you don't like to do it, then just don't. I mean, I have plenty of students who will frequently in check-in, they'll just be like, yeah, I'm good. And I'll be like, okay, next person. And so, other people, quote unquote, might overshare, and that's good for them. And you don't have to involve yourself in that. You can just sit back and sort of zone out. But it is a good opportunity for people to get stuff off their chest, get support, and to communicate about things. And so, and it'd be different if you were in a different field. I mean, you're getting a master's in counseling. So it sounds like there's something about this that is triggering you that I would definitely look at, because you're going to have clients that are going to share a lot. And as a therapist, you got to share stuff. Like you cannot not share. You've got to open up and share things to your supervisors and your classmates and your instructors. You cannot be a person that is like, look, don't invade my space. That I get the trauma response, and so I would heal from that. But if you were in a different field, then you could draw boundaries and not have it affect your work. But this is going to be a central healing for you and a central development of coping style where, like, I could see a scenario where a year from now, you've told all your professors that you have this trauma and you tell them some days I'm going to want to share and some days I'm not. And how are we going to be able to communicate about that? But that's sharing, right? You got to share to your professor that you have that issue. And so I would really worry about your well-being without that mechanism of sharing and without getting support. It's critical. And I see people who don't do that as novice therapists and they crumble emotionally under the pressure. And so for your sake, I would, find someone you do feel safe with and really establish some, some ground rules or guidance or protocols or something. All right, let's take a break. When we get back, let's answer more questions. What do you say, Bob?
Yes.
All right, we're back from the break. Will we get to all the questions? It's possible, Bob. Anonymous patron writes in, I have been suffering from depression and social anxiety for a while, and I've been recently looking into going to therapy. I found a therapist that is mainly a family therapist in systems theory, but she says she treats individuals as well. I'm a little hesitant because of her being a family therapist and not specialized in depression or anxiety. I have tried CBT before, and it did not work for me. There is a lot of tension within my family that has made me the scapegoat, if you will. So I could see maybe it helping to work with a family therapist in systems theory. Do you think a family therapist could treat an individual with long-term depression, or will I be wasting my money? Would love to hear your thoughts.
Actually, what I want to know is what you think. You have a background in family therapy and I do not.
Yeah. So your question is, can a family therapist help you with depression? Yes, of course. And it's worth a shot. And family therapists definitely use systems theory, but they use all the theories. They use all the same theories as anyone else would, CBT, et cetera. But they tend to work more relationally. So there's that. Like me and Bob, for example. Bob comes from the mental health counseling world, and I come from the family therapy world. And yet him and I are very similar in the way that we provide therapy and the way that we see things. So it's hard to know if you're going to a quote-unquote, family therapist if it's the sort of therapist that would be good for you. And in the same way, it'd be hard to know if you went to a mental health counselor if they're going to be best for you. It's just, you just got to try them out. So that's my answer to that. Does that make sense to you, Bob?
Yeah, agreed.
I have a lot of emails about people asking about becoming a therapist, a lot of aspiring therapists. Patron Marius from Romania says, what would you suggest to people who aspire to be therapists in countries where therapy is stigmatized? The neglect I suffered in my past made me want to help people who are going through hard times. But the situation in Romania makes it that people don't consult therapists since that's for crazy people. I plan on enrolling in a master's of clinical psychology. I would like to hear your advice. Bob, what do you think?
I don't know. Well, I think you know best. There are some obstacles to success, maybe to finding a place to work or starting your own practice because of, cultural beliefs that, people in Romania hold. So you're up against it, but this is not dissimilar from the thing that the other person earlier mentioned about how come there aren't any Asian folks represented. You just see white people. You will be blazing a trail. Yeah. And it is going to be hard.
Right. So it's hard to know and I think Bob is feeling this tension too, is that if you want to be a therapist, then go for it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if there's no market in Romania for to work, then maybe that isn't a good idea, right? So on one hand, the fact that it's so stigmatized means that there aren't enough therapists for the people who need therapists in Romania. On the other hand, if it's so stigmatized no one goes to therapy, then I would definitely research your job prospects. But, I've never heard a situation like this being a problem. I'm guessing maybe it is sometimes. But if it is your calling and you want to do it, I would definitely look into it, and I would definitely ask those few therapists that are practicing, like, so what are my job prospects and how do I get there? Because you don't want to graduate into a society that can't support your occupation.
Yes.
Patron Brenna from California says, what is your opinion on aspiring therapists with a lot of childhood trauma? Do you feel that these people are able to become successful therapists after working on their own traumas? I'm currently applying to MFT programs, but I'm afraid that I would not make a good therapist. Bob, what do you think?
Well, we can't know because, I don't even know how to assess such a thing. This is my standard answer. If you want to do it, go give it a shot. Give it a try. Go do it. I don't think that childhood trauma necessarily will have. You're likely to be challenged in some ways. The things that you come across in your clients are likely to raise some countertransfer inside you, or just your own trauma responses to the things that you encounter. And if you're willing to kind of do that, it's not going to happen all the time, but if you're willing to kind of go through that, great. You might pick and choose who you work with so that you limit that if you need to. But I think a lot of people who have trauma histories just make this presumption that they wouldn't make a good therapist. I have a pretty extensive trauma history, and I've never had that thought.
And you're an excellent therapist.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I know my way around the block. So my leaning is to encourage you. The fact that you're even asking this question suggests a level of insight that's going to suit you. I think you should go for it.
Right. And the only other thing I'll say is everyone has trauma to some degree. It's just that you know it, emailer.
Right on.
Anonymous patron from Hawaii, she says, I am an elementary art teacher, and very happy with my job. However, I find that throughout my life, and especially recently, many friends open up to me when they are having a hard time. I really appreciate and like being in that role of listener. It makes me wonder if a career switch to counseling might be a good fit. Are there personality qualities that make for better therapists? P.S. I am married to a HAPA, and therefore we have a child who is a QAPA, and I love when you talk about the specialness of HAPA culture. End of email. Just chiming in again, Hawaii, married to a HAPA. Big surprise. Descendants, hardly any Asians in the entire movie. And I'll tell you, I've never heard that term, QAPA, but I know instantly what it means, which is instead of half-a, you are now quarter-a. And I like that a lot. This anonymous patron from Hawaii she's asking, are there any personality qualities that make for better therapists? Bob, what do you think?
I have no idea. Are there?
No. I have seen all sorts of personalities succeed in this business.
Yeah.
Super compassionate people, super, I would say, cold people. And they can be good therapists. They can learn to be compassionate. Super directive people, super flaky people, super driven people, super nice people, super not so nice people. And I've seen them all succeed. So I don't think there is a personality trait. It stands to reason that there would be, but it's a profession and you learn it. And as long as you aren't, but even I think some psychopaths can be actually good therapists as well. So I think if you have the desire and you feel like you enjoy the action of listening and investigating people's psychologies, then I'm guessing that you'll do what it takes to be effective.
This person already has some evidence that they're good at it. Their friends approach them and they have this intuition about themselves. So
yeah, and they're a better person than other white people because they married a HAPA person.
Yeah, exactly.
Anonymous patron says, what is your opinion on therapy styles where the therapist uses examples from their own life or talks about themselves while giving you advice? It sometimes feel like a conversation with a close friend rather than understanding deep work when my therapist does this. But I see the value in it as well. So again, what's your opinion on therapy styles where the therapist uses examples from their own life or talks about themselves while giving you advice? Bob, what do you think?
I talk about myself with regular frequency to normalize experience, particularly trauma experience. Well, not particularly that, but sometimes that. So, but what I'm hearing in this email is that this person doesn't like it when their therapist uses personal examples. My question is how safe do you feel bringing that up?
Right. Yeah, that's the key, is that there's always going to be some tension there. And by all means, everyone out there, if you don't like something about your therapist, tell them.
Yeah.
And I could follow this advice too, because as a client myself, I rarely will say anything. My therapist, a therapist in the past, she was pregnant and probably not sleeping very well. You know, she's very pregnant. And she, I think, fell asleep in the middle of a session. At least her eyes were very, very closed. And I get it. You know, I can ramble for sure in therapy and anywhere else, but particularly therapy. And so I get it. And it didn't bother me that much, but I didn't say anything. You know, I what I wanted to say was, you know, if you need to take a break, just tell me, because I'd rather have you like stand up or tell me to shut up or something than to just talking to someone with their eyes closed. So, you know, in a compassionate way, like I've been there as a therapist, you know, we're just having a hard day and you're really trying to hold on, you know, to benefit the client, but then it, you know, it backfires instead of you just taking action. Like I need to take a break and sort of wake myself up. So, you know, and I didn't say anything, and I just recommend that, you know, if you have a therapist that's talking a lot about themselves and you're just like kind of bored with it, or you feel like it's not real therapy, you know, just tell them. Just tell them, hey, I find that when you talk about your own life, I'm getting a little annoyed. And any good therapist will be mortified by that and be, oh my God, thank you for telling me. And, you know, I'll definitely change. I thought I was doing something that was helping people, and this is kind of my style, but I could definitely, you know, scale that back.
And even go further than that. Like, what's it like to tell me?
Yeah.
Like, because there's something important I think there's something useful to be learned about there. My therapist is chronically late. He's late somewhere between 2 and 4 minutes for every session.
Huh. Well, with those long legs, you think he'd be early.
You'd think. Yeah. Actually, with COVID, you'd think he's home.
Yeah. How are you late to a home appointment? Right?
Yeah. And it used to bother me, and I wouldn't say anything. And then I did say anything, and that led to a tremendous amount of shame for me being, you know, frustrated or disappointed in him or angry with him. And there was this really interesting tension between you should be on time and you're not. So me with my judgment that you should be on time because, you know, this is the work that you do, and you're not, led to, let's see, how can I say it? He's still late. Now I'm late. Or I don't sweat being on time so much for my meetings with him. I still strive to be on time for my clients, but I don't sweat his lateness. And we can still talk about it. We still joke about it. I still don't like it. And I don't think I need to like everything that he does or is. And we get to keep talking about it. That's what's great about therapy relationships is it's not one and done. You get to keep talking about it. So I imagine it's going to come around again. And the learning for me is it's safe to raise a complaint. It's safe to say, yeah, today this bugs me. Whereas before I would be like, oh, I'm going to eat this one and feel resentful. And, you know, they say resentment's like taking poison and hoping the other guy dies. So I don't have to go through that. And he's still late. Yeah. Right. So that's his weirdness. I don't know.
Do you go over?
I've noticed, huh?
Do you go over because to compensate, or
sometimes if he's more late, then yeah, he'll extend the session. But if it's just a couple minutes,
does he say why he's late?
Yeah, occasionally he'll say bathroom break or had to eat something or had to make a cup of tea or something. Usually, if he says anything, it's usually stuff like that.
Was he late in person?
Yeah.
And similar reasons? Bathroom?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So in an ideal universe, we would be on time. I get it. And in this universe, that's not what happens in my counseling sessions. And we make lemonade out of the lemon. Yeah, I'd still rather he were on time.
Yeah.
But I also have gotten something really beneficial in having it happen and having to talk about it. Like, I don't know that I would have.
Yeah. At the same time, I just want to say it's extremely annoying in any context, but particularly therapy, man. I mean, like, be on time, people. Like, it's not hard.
It's annoying.
I think once in a while, maybe, but as an extremely punctual person myself,
Well, right.
I find it just boggling. Like,
Yeah.
if you're the sort of person where it's like, like let's say you have like a doctor's appointment once a year and you don't really know the route and you don't know the parking lot and you arrive a little late because you didn't gauge it right, I would get that. But if you're a therapist, you're literally doing this multiple times a day. And if you can't get your S together, like just to harp on your therapist for just people like this, just like
good.
Like if the bathroom break thing is a problem. Now, if he had a legitimate thing, like I have a condition that means that I got to go to the bathroom every day, or I have to do that.
Yeah.
But he's not saying that, right? He's just saying, I got kind of hung up on this thing or something.
Who knows? Yeah.
And account for it, people. If it happens once, then learn from the experience. Like, because of this, I need this. And then maybe what you do is you schedule, something that I used to do is I used to schedule half-hour breaks in between every client. And that gave me just more kind of breathing room, And
Yeah, right.
therefore, I was never up against, the wall regarding my next client. The feeling of going to therapy and you show up on time, because you don't want to make them wait if they're on time, right? And you're ready to go and you're just like, okay, it's 2 minutes after, it's 3 minutes. Like, what is this going to be a 15-minute? Did they forget? That is like a terrible place to be in. And all you got to do is get your crap together. And I just find that to be really annoying.
Clearly.
Your therapist sounds like the perfect therapist for you. And I'm glad that you're making lemonade out of lemons, and maybe this is helpful, maybe he's doing it on purpose, who knows, but
No, he's not.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just don't understand. Like, and there's some of the smartest people I know. Umberto, for example, I've literally tested his IQ. He is he's on the charts, but he is close to the edge. He's, according on some scales, he's like 99.5% smarter. He's smarter than 99.5% of the population of the planet.
Wow.
Yeah, he's like really at the top end.
Like wicked smart.
And he's chronically late. And he'll always have a good excuse. But you never learn from your past mistakes, Like, you never account for the possibility. Like, you're that dumb about it. Like, you can't be that dumb. There must be something about this that is just, I don't know, man. It would be one thing if you're late for your own stuff, like you're late to pick up your order for dinner or something and it's cold. But this is other human beings, and you're harming other people in the process. And
Harming, that's a guess. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Who knows?
Well, I'm harmed when people are late. When I have to go to the airport and my friend says they're going to be on time and they don't show up on time, and I'm sitting on the porch for 45 minutes going, I'm going to miss my plane.
Right.
I'm being harmed.
Oh, I got it. I didn't know we were talking about that. Right, got it. 2 minutes, I'm not sure if I'm harmed. So I don't want to presume that because you really don't like this, that it necessarily means that there is damage done.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of a therapist I know who I was probably one of the best, among the best therapists I ever met. I worked with her on a team, and she's just aces, right? If you had her for your therapist, you'd be a very fortunate person. And she would say to us in our team meetings, I'm chronically 10 minutes late. And it's been going on most of my career, all of my career.
Did she say why?
She said, I don't recall the details of this, but what she said to us is, I don't want a pat solution that I know isn't going to work. I've done that already. I've done the end the session early thing. She's tried all these things, and what she notices is that they don't actually capture whatever the problem is. The reason I'm bringing her up isn't so much that we actually solved her late problem. I don't think we put a dent in it. What we did is we validated that for some reason it's actually quite hard for her to be on time.
But did she ever identify, and I respect this, but did she ever identify, like, this is why I'm late?
No, and that's why we didn't bother with the pat excuses, because it's probably something psychologic that's happening for her. And if we had time and the wherewithal and maybe even the insight at the moment, we maybe would have got somewhere with that, right? So it's a dialectic, because on the one hand, I understand your point about being late and being on time. I value being on time too.
Yeah, you're very on time.
No, I'm actually late a fair amount.
Oh.
Even
well, to me, you're on time.
Yeah, I try to be. I'm actually usually I could be anywhere from on time to 2 or 3 minutes late to our every other week podcast session. Yeah,
but
we don't have a firm start. It's not like you have flexibility around that, and so yeah. The other side of the coin is it's going to be something, right? The transference, countertransference bits of my relationship with my therapist are going to be somewhere, and they happen to be one of the ways they show up is here. And what I've really appreciated about it is it's created a sense of flexibility inside me. Now, listen, I'm not letting that guy off the hook. I think it sounds like I am.
No.
Like I'm saying, well, because I love my therapist, he can do no wrong. Nah.
Well, I'm not talking about your therapist now. I'm talking about all the people that have annoyed me or hurt me by being late. Because as an on-time person, it hurts. It hurts my feelings.
Really bugs you.
Because call it psychological. It is, but at the same time, like, where are your priorities? And people have the capability of being on time. Like friends of mine who are always late, or family members who are always late. If they had a plane to catch, they'd be on time. If they have a job and they're going to be fired, they'll be on time. If they won the lottery and they had to show up by a certain time, they'd be on time. So it's not like they're incapable. But I guess you're right in that there's a psychological reason. But I guess I would hope that they would prioritize that. You
want them to, sure.
That they would say, my psychological trauma is getting in the way of me being a good family member or friend, and people depend on me, and I made a commitment, and I'm gonna prioritize that human being in the same way I prioritize being on time for the airplane. I'm gonna really empathize with that human and understand that me being on time is critical. Now, for you, Bob, being a couple minutes late, it's not that big of a deal.
Oh, for our meetings?
Yeah, for you, and I get that. I'm really just talking about, and I guess I'm kind of yelling at therapists in general, and maybe you, Bob, I don't know, but
maybe.
A very common complaint I get from people is my therapist is late sometimes, and it hurts them.
Yeah,
and I hurt for those clients. I can't think I've ever I don't think I've ever had a therapist who was late like that. But yeah, I think, particularly if I was real vulnerable, particularly if it was chronic, and if they didn't go over, if they were 10 minutes late and we went over 10 minutes, and it's like, okay, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
But if they didn't, then I'd just be like, do you care? Like, am I chopped liver over here? Does this matter to you?
Do I matter? Right.
And I think that's what it comes down to. Is it, whether it's intended or not? Of course, it's not intended. It's almost never intended. But it comes across as like, I don't matter.
So I actually have been going through this for the last several months with one of my clients who I strive to be on time for, but I'm not perfect. And that's the story, the meaning that he makes out of my lateness, is that I don't care, which is really interesting because it does not match my inner world. I look at that person and I know, yeah, I care about you. Actually, I care about you quite a great deal. I like you, respect you, and I'm late, and they're actually not the same. Like there's a differentiation between my care and my punctuality. Now, he doesn't like it, but does it mean I don't care? No. And if I'm not saying I strive to be late in order to create this dynamic. I don't. It's just what happened. But we're at the beginning of a really interesting conversation about what it means to him, and that's useful because there's an opportunity for him to learn about something I think that's actually quite important about himself and his place in the universe and whether or not he has one. I suspect that there's I'm not sure which of the defense mechanisms it is. It's the one where, hey, if I'm on time, then why can't you be on time? I strive to be on time, and that's how I show people that I care about them. So how come you're not doing that? That must mean that you don't care about me, which of course is not true. I do care. I just am late sometimes. But if we stick with that paradigm, then we limit him. But what do I want for him? I want greater flexibility for him. I want him to recognize that his value is not in his punctuality, and that he might very well care about such and such a person, and it might be really important to him, and for some reason, maybe practical, maybe incidental, maybe psychologic, he happens to be late. What does he want to do? Does he want to hold that, oh, I've done a bad thing? Idea, story about self, or does he want to separate himself from his behavior? And I'm guessing that second one is probably in the long run more important for him, even if he doesn't feel like it's true. It's probably more important for him than the first one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've ranted about this occasionally with you and Berto and others.
Yeah, sure.
And hearing you talk about it has expanded my mind a little bit. I don't think I had gone deeper than my own kind of reactivity, and the idea that someone being late doesn't necessarily indicate lack of care,
right,
which of course makes sense. And also that, and of course it makes sense that being late could be a psychological thing and sort of really difficult for someone to change. And I'll tell you that overall, because I've been a punctual person since I was a child, and I, for years, have been dealing with it and have adjusted and said, I'm going to let it go. And I identify certain people as, well, they're a late person, and so that's fine, and it'll annoy me kind of, but it doesn't get me down. And I actually, if they show up on time, then I'm like pleasantly surprised. You know what I mean? So it's just a matter of expectations.
Understood. Makes sense.
But at the same time, hearing you talk about it, I think, and especially I guess for therapy, is obviously talking about it. But I don't know. I still hold to therapists need to get their stuff together.
Yeah.
And why would you want to perturb every client in this way?
Not want to. No, for sure. I'll tell you what. This is the final thing I'll say about it, is when he spoke up, it was really important that he spoke up.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, it bothers me that you're late. And what it says to me is that you don't care. We got to have a really important conversation about that, believe me, was really hard for me, because I'm like, oh God, I'm such a bad guy, right? And that whole thing gets activated inside me. And it was cool because on the one hand, of course it gets activated, and also there's this, I took the opportunity to set that aside and hang in the conversation and feel bad. Okay, fine, feel bad, yeah, right, but not get locked into my I'm a bad guy thoughts, and stay with them around it. Oh, it says to you that I don't care. I experience myself as actually caring about you a great deal, but that's what it says to you, that I must not care about you. That's really interesting, isn't it? How could those possibly exist at the same time? that I look at me and I'm like, yeah, no, I know I care about you. And you look at me and say, well, because of this behavior, you must not. And we stayed in the tension. And we've been staying in the tension since. And we actually spent a session several weeks later entirely on that issue. Entirely. And on the one hand, it's probably not what anybody would really love to talk about in therapy. It's like maybe they got other fish to fry that day. On the other hand, it was an opportunity for us to be in connection with one another, for him to be frustrated and disappointed in me, and for me to survive it, and our relationship to survive it, and to keep going, as opposed to then it's now this stone in our shoes that we walk around with and we're irritated by. So I don't want to be late, right? I don't want to. And if I am, I'm not ducking. I'm going to talk to him about it because I know that it's a area where he can have that story can get activated. And I think we both owe it to him to stay in the tension and continue to learn about it. So we do. And it is excruciating. I hate it.
Yeah.
Sort of. Part of me hates it. Part
because
of me is like,
it triggers your defectiveness schema.
yeah, because of that. But part of me, I really like it actually, because
if you lean into it.
Yeah, right. Juicy.
Yeah.
Useful. Good for him.
Yeah.
That's
good
cool.
for you.
Yeah, good for me too, right?
All right, everyone out there, we're going to end this on time. Actually, we're 2 minutes late.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, of ending it. Bob, you said you wanted to end at 1. It's 1:02. So I'm following in your footsteps. I apologize. And everyone
you don't care about me.
Everyone out there, please take care of yourself and be freaking on time, because
you deserve it.